Mystery File: The dark truth behind Maduro's fall intro. A country stolen in 47 seconds. January 3rd, 2026, 5:21 a.m. Before the first lights of dawn in Venezuela's capital Caracas, something changed in the sky. Flying low, just 30 meters above sea level, helicopters glided through the darkness. More than 150 aircraft took off simultaneously from 20 different bases. This was one of the largest military operations seen since World War II, and the target, the leader of a country with the world's largest oil reserves, Nicolás Maduro. But this story isn't just about capturing a leader, it's the story of 27 years of tension, secret CIA operations, dark drug cartels, and a grand chess game played over the world's richest oil deposits. It's the story of how a bus driver became a dictator and ultimately collapsed in just 47 seconds. Welcome. I'm your channel name. And today I'm going to tell you the dark truth about Venezuela, Maduro's secret world, and the behind the scenes of the US's shocking operation. Because there's much more to this story than meets the eye. Chapter 1. The Beginning. A Driver's Mysterious Rise. November 23rd, 1962. Born in one of Caracas's poor neighborhoods to a working-class family, Nicolás Maduro had a destiny no one could predict. His father was a union leader, and young Nicolás learned the language of the streets and the voice of struggle from an early age. But Maduro's life wasn't the story of an ordinary worker. In his youth, he dropped out of high school and made a mysterious decision to go to Cuba. Yes, to Fidel Castro's Cuba. What did he do there? Official records are silent, but according to some sources, during that very period, he connected with Cuban intelligence service Dirección de Inteligencia. And this is where the story gets interesting. When he returned to Venezuela in the early 1990s, he was no longer just a bus driver. He rose to union leadership, but the real change happened when he met Hugo Chavez. Chavez had attempted a military coup at the time and was imprisoned after it failed. So what did Maduro do? He became one of the frontline figures fighting for Chavez's freedom. Coincidence? Or was it part of a larger plan? Some experts claim that Maduro was specially assigned by the Cuban government to approach Chavez. According to Cuban intelligence expert Carlos Peñalosa Zambrano, Maduro returned to Venezuela as a mole. His purpose? To reach Hugo Chavez, who had a rising military career, and influence him. Believe it or not, this strategy worked. When Chavez became president in 1999, Maduro was one of his closest men. He was elected to the National Assembly, became Assembly President, became Foreign Minister, and in 2012, with a critical move, he rose to Vice Presidency. March 5th, 2013, Hugo Chavez died of cancer, and who succeeded him? Of course, his loyal friend, his right hand, perhaps the man placed by Cuba, Nicolás Maduro. But something Chavez did before his death still causes controversy. Before dying, Chavez addressed the people on television and clearly stated, "If something happens to me, vote for Nicolás Maduro. He is the strongest young leader who can continue." Why? Why not someone like Diosdado Cabello with strong military connections and charisma, but Maduro? The answer to this question may never be fully known, but one thing is certain. Maduro's rise wasn't filled with coincidences. Chapter 2. Dark Power. 13 years of extraordinary rule. April 14, 2013, Maduro won the special election by just 50.6%, a very narrow margin. Opposition candidate Enrique Capriles contested the results. The streets erupted, protests turned violent, and Maduro's true face began to emerge. Chavez was charismatic, a beloved leader among the people. But Maduro, he was a completely different character. Harsh, ruthless, and paranoid. In his early years, the economy began to collapse, but Maduro found the culprit in external forces, the US, CIA, counter-revolutionaries. Economic catastrophe. In 2013, Venezuela's economy entered a collapse process. Oil prices fell, and the country, dependent on a single income source, faced a major crisis. But the real problem was elsewhere. The Maduro administration exploited state oil company PDVSA to finance its own social programs. PDVSA was once one of the world's most powerful oil companies, but during Maduro's period it collapsed due to corruption and mismanagement. Talented personnel fled, investments stopped, and production dropped rapidly. Venezuela, which produced 2 million barrels of oil per day in 2013, now produces only 1 million barrels. And the result? Hyperinflation, food crisis, medicine crisis, power cuts, soaring crime rates. While people on the streets were dying of hunger, market shelves were empty. What did Maduro do? He put forward the economic war theory. According to him, the US and the opposition were deliberately collapsing the economy to sabotage the country. But the truth was much more complex. Yes, there were US sanctions, but the real issue was the incredible corruption of the Maduro administration. Corruption, a notable incident occurred in 2018. When Maduro was returning from a China visit, he ate at Nusret Gökçe's famous restaurant Nusret in Istanbul. Gold-plated meat, expensive wine, an ostentatious feast. While people in Venezuela were dying of hunger, Maduro was enjoying himself at a luxury restaurant in Istanbul. The video went viral on social media and caused great anger in the country. The opposition said, "He's living it up with money stolen from the people," and this was just the tip of the iceberg. It's alleged that Maduro's family, especially his wife Celia Flores, operates a drug cartel called Cartel de los Soles, Cartel of the Suns. The US administration claims that Maduro is personally at the head of this cartel and smuggled tons of cocaine into the US. In 2020, the US placed a $15 million bounty on Maduro's capture. Charges: narco-terrorism, cocaine importation, arms trafficking. Maduro rejected these accusations and claimed the US was targeting oil resources. But what was the truth? Chapter 3: Counter-Revolution, the Guaido Crisis and Secret Operations. The 2018 elections were the most controversial moments in Maduro's rule. The opposition boycotted the elections, international observers didn't participate, and the result wasn't surprising. Maduro won with 67%, but the turnout was only 46%, the lowest level in Venezuelan history, because no one believed in this election. January 10, 2019. Maduro took the oath of office. But a day earlier, National Assembly President Juan Guaido declared himself interim president. And surprisingly, the US immediately recognized Guaido. The Trump administration announced it no longer regarded Maduro as the legitimate leader. More than 50 countries supported Guaido. Venezuela had two presidents, Maduro and Guaido. The streets turned into a war zone. Protests turned violent. Hundreds of people died. Maduro maintained his power with the support of the military and security forces, and right at that moment, much darker things were happening behind the scenes. Operation Gideon, failed coup. May 4th, 2020. On Venezuela's northern coast, two groups of armed men tried to land by boat, but the operation turned into a complete fiasco. Venezuelan security forces were waiting for them. 8 people were killed, dozens captured, and among them were 2 American former Special Forces soldiers, Luke Denman and Aaron Berry. Who planned this operation? Former Green Beret soldier Jordan Goudreau. Goudreau was the founder of a private military company called Silvercorp USA and allegedly had made a deal with Juan Guaido. The plan was simple: kidnap Maduro and deliver him to the US. But the operation was exposed. Maduro gave a victory speech on television and openly accused the US. The Trump administration said it had nothing to do with the operation. But was that really true? The CIA's secret game. In October 2025, Associated Press broke a shocking story. US Homeland Security agent Edwin Lopez had secretly met with Maduro's personal pilot, General Bitner Villegas, in the Dominican Republic, and offered him a fortune to redirect Maduro's plane to a US-controlled area. For 16 months, Lopez stayed in contact with the pilot through encrypted messaging apps. The plan was simple: kidnap Maduro during a plane journey, but the pilot refused. The plan failed. So how determined was the US December 10, 2025? The US Navy seized an oil tanker named Skipper off Venezuela's coast. Maduro called this open piracy. Trump said Venezuela illegally took oil rights belonging to the US. Tension was rising, and everyone knew something big was going to happen. Chapter 4, Operation Absolute Resolve, 47-second collapse, January 3, 2026, midnight. At the Mar-a-Lago mansion in Florida, Donald Trump was watching large screens with his generals. Real-time military operation footage was streaming on the screen. Trump would later say, "It was like watching a TV show." But this was real. And at that moment, one of history's greatest military operations was beginning. Operation Details, code name, Operation Absolute Resolve, preparation time, months, participating force, 150 plus aircraft, 20 different bases. Target: Nicolás Maduro helicopters entered Venezuelan airspace, flying 30 meters above sea level. They were flying low to avoid radar systems. Delta Force was America's most elite special forces unit, and they were directing this operation. The CIA and NSA had been monitoring Maduro's movements for months. Where did he live? What routes did he use? What was his security system like? Everything was noted and analyzed, and at exactly 5:21 a.m. the operation began. The attack begins. At least 7 explosions occurred in Caracas, Fort Tuna military base, Miranda Air Base, La Guaira port, and antenna stations at Cerro El Volcan were targeted. Rockets lit up the sky, missiles hit military hangars, the power went out and Caracas was plunged into darkness. People poured into the streets. There was panic, no one understood what was happening, and right at that moment, Delta Force entered the military complex where Maduro was located. Maduro and his wife, Celia Flores, were sleeping in their bedroom. When the explosion started, they woke up and in panic tried to escape to a secure area protected by steel doors. But Delta Force was too fast. According to Trump's account, Maduro opened the steel door but didn't have a chance to close it. "We opened those steel doors in 47 seconds and grabbed him," Trump said. 47 seconds. The end of a man's 13-year rule lasted just 47 seconds. Capture in darkness. Delta Force soldiers' helmet camera footage, which hasn't been released to the public yet, shows Maduro and his wife being dragged out from their bedroom. Hands were handcuffed, eyes were covered. Outside, Cuban security forces tried to resist. According to Trump, many Cubans lost their lives. They were there to protect Maduro, but they had no chance. The operation lasted less than 30 minutes in total. Maduro and his wife were loaded onto waiting helicopters and taken to the amphibious assault ship USS Iwo Jima. There were no casualties on the US side. Some helicopters were hit but continued flying. A few soldiers were injured, but nothing serious. Casualties on the Venezuelan side. No official statement has been made yet, but the Caracas administration said there were civilian and military casualties. Chapter 5. Journey to New York. A dictator's last day on USS Iwo Jima. Maduro and his wife Celia Flores were held with hands cuffed and eyes covered. Who spoke with them on the ship? What was said? This information is still secret, but one thing is certain. Maduro was no longer a head of state. He was a criminal. A few hours later, a private plane landed at Stewart Air National Guard Base. This base just north of New York was where Maduro took his first steps on US soil. Photos were taken, video was recorded. Trump shared a photo of Maduro with handcuffed hands on Truth Social, face blurred, eyes and ears covered. This was a message sent to the world. Look, we caught this man, and no one is untouchable. Trial in New York. Maduro and his wife were taken to the Metropolitan Federal Detention Center in Brooklyn, the same facility that previously housed famous criminals like El Chapo. U.S. Attorney General Pam Bondi announced that Maduro and Flores would be tried in the Southern District of New York on charges of narco-terrorism conspiracy and cocaine importation conspiracy. The charges were serious: narco-terrorism, cocaine importation, weapons possession, conspiracy, organized crime organization management. According to these charges, Maduro and his administration smuggled tons of cocaine into the US and used the proceeds to both enrich themselves and finance the terrorist organization called Cartel of the Suns. How will Maduro's lawyers, if he can find any, defend against these charges? How long will the trial process take? And most importantly, will Maduro receive a prison sentence? Do you remember Manuel Noriega? Panama's former leader was captured by the US in 1989 and tried in Miami. He was sentenced to 40 years in prison and served his sentence. Could Maduro's fate be similar? Chapter 6. Why now? Venezuela's secret treasure. But there's a critical question. Why now? Why did the US carry out this operation in 2026 at the beginning of Trump's second term? The answer seems simple: drugs and democracy. But the truth is much more complex. Oil. Black Gold Venezuela has the world's largest proven oil reserves, 303 billion barrels, even more than Saudi Arabia. But there's a problem. This oil isn't being extracted. Due to sanctions, mismanagement, and corruption, Venezuela's oil production has dropped 70% in the last 15 years. 2 million barrels per day were produced in 2013. Today, only 1 million barrels. And what did Trump say after the operation? The US and American companies will be very strongly involved in Venezuela's oil industry. By spending billions of dollars, we will repair the oil infrastructure and sell large amounts of oil to Venezuela and other countries. So it wasn't just about catching Maduro, it was about taking control of Venezuelan oil. Rare earth elements, blue gold. But there's another secret treasure in the story. Rare earth elements, the Orinoco mining belt. In southern Venezuela, a massive area of 112,000 square kilometers. There's not just oil here, gold, diamonds, coltan, nickel, and most importantly, rare earth elements. What are rare earth elements? They're the lifeblood of modern technology. Smartphones, electric cars, wind turbines, military technology, they all depend on rare earth elements. And currently, 80% of the world market is controlled by China. The US wants to break this dependency, and Venezuela has one of the largest reserves of this.
And Venezuela has one of the largest reserves of these elements. The Trump administration wanted to buy Greenland. Why? Rare earth elements. They made a mining deal with Ukraine. Why? Rare earth elements. And now they intervened in Venezuela. Coincidence? The China and Russia factor. The Maduro administration developed close relations with China and Russia in recent years. China gave billions of dollars in loans to Venezuela and took receivables in exchange for oil. Russia provided military support and invested in the energy sector. For the US, this was unacceptable. According to the Monroe Doctrine, Latin America was the US's backyard, and China and Russia's strengthening in this region was nothing but a strategic threat to Washington. Trump's national security strategy has a concept called Trump corollary to the Monroe Doctrine. This emphasizes that the US should be the sole hegemon power in the Western Hemisphere. And the Venezuela operation was the implementation of this doctrine. Chapter 7. Venezuela's future. Who's in charge? What happened after Maduro was captured? Who's running Venezuela now? According to Trump's statement, the U.S. will govern Venezuela until a secure, appropriate, and reasonable transition occurs. But what does this mean? Delcy Rodriguez, interim leader. According to the Constitution, when the president leaves office, the vice president must take over. And Maduro's vice president was Delcy Rodriguez. Rodriguez took the oath after the operation and declared herself president. But the U.S. didn't recognize this. Rodriguez demanded on television that Maduro be immediately released and said, Venezuela will not be anyone's colony. But it's unclear whether Rodriguez has full support from the military and security forces. After Maduro, serious cracks formed within the Chavismo movement. Edmundo Gonzalez, the real winner? In the 2024 presidential elections, opposition candidate Edmundo Gonzalez won the election. Vote tallies collected by the opposition showed Gonzalez received more than 60% of the vote. But the Maduro government, through the National Electoral Council, announced that Maduro had won. The tallies were never released. Now Gonzalez is outside Venezuela, and so is opposition leader Maria Corina Machado. Trump didn't announce support for Gonzalez. In fact, he said Machado doesn't have the necessary support or respect. So who is Trump supporting? Maybe no one. Maybe the goal is to bring Venezuela directly under U.S. control. The U.S. plan, oil empire. According to Trump's statements, U.S. companies will repair Venezuela's oil infrastructure and sell large amounts of oil. Chevron, ExxonMobil, ConocoPhillips. These companies were kicked out of Venezuela in the early 2000s. Chavez nationalized the oil industry and expelled foreign companies from the country. Now they're coming back. And the Venezuelan people? What do they want? Chapter 8. World reactions, regional tension, and new world order. The U.S. military intervention in Venezuela shook not just one country, but all of Latin America. Latin America's reaction, anger and fear. Colombian President Gustavo Petro wrote on Twitter, "Warn the world, Venezuela is under attack." Mexico, Brazil, Chile, Argentina. Nearly all Latin American countries condemned the intervention. Why? Because Latin America is a continent that has suffered from U.S. interventions throughout history. The CIA-backed coup in Guatemala in 1954, Pinochet's coup in Chile in 1973, the Grenada invasion in 1983, the Panama intervention in 1989, and now Venezuela. For Latin American peoples, this is a sovereignty issue. Yes, Maduro was a bad leader, but does another country have the right to forcibly overthrow another leader? This question caused deep debates in the region. Russia and China, harsh reaction. The Russian Foreign Ministry described the operation as an armed attack against Venezuela and said they wanted to prevent further escalation. China remained silent. However, China has billions of dollars invested in Venezuela, and the Maduro government owed China large amounts of oil. With Maduro's fall, the future of these debts is uncertain. For Russia and China, the Venezuela operation was a demonstration of U.S. power. The message was clear. There are new rules in the world order, and we're making these rules. Europe. Silent approval. The European Union didn't openly condemn the operation. EU officials said they were monitoring the situation and supporting democratic transition. This was actually silent approval. Europe already didn't regard the Maduro administration as legitimate. They hadn't recognized the 2018 elections. However, the military intervention method caused controversy in Europe too. According to international law, military intervention in a country can only be done with a UN Security Council decision. The US didn't obtain such a decision. It acted unilaterally. Was this a dangerous precedent? Chapter 9. Conspiracy theories. What's behind the facts? And now, we come to the darkest part, because there's much more to this story than meets the eye. Theory 1. Did Maduro make a deal? Some opposition sources told BBC and Sky News something surprising. Maduro negotiated with the US and left the country. What does this mean? Maybe Maduro wasn't captured. Maybe he made a deal. Maybe the US promised him and his family immunity, money, and a safe life, and in return, Maduro voluntarily surrendered. If this is true, why would such a deal be made? The answer is simple: to prevent bloodshed. If Maduro had resisted, a civil war could have broken out in Venezuela. The military, Chavistas, collectives, all were armed and ready to fight. Maybe the US told Maduro, either you surrender or your country turns into a bloodbath. Choose. And Maduro chose. But this is just a theory. The official statement is that Maduro was forcibly taken from his bedroom. Theory 2. Is Maduro dead? There's a darker theory. Is Maduro actually dead? Venezuelan Vice President Delcy Rodriguez said after the operation, "We don't know where Maduro is. We want proof that he's alive." The US released photos of Maduro, but his face was blurred. Was it really him? Some social media users claim the person in the photos isn't Maduro. Body language was different, height was different. If Maduro is dead, why would the US hide it? Perhaps to cover up an international law violation, because killing a head of state is a much more serious crime than capturing him. But this is also just a theory. There's no evidence. Theory 3. The Turkey connection. Maduro and Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan had been very close friends for many years. Erdogan had received support from Maduro after the 2016 coup attempt, and the two met frequently. Some analysts claim Turkey prepared a secret escape plan for Maduro. Maybe Maduro was planning to flee to Turkey, but the US found out and accelerated the operation. Turkey officially remained silent. However, Erdogan didn't share anything about Maduro on social media. This was different from normal, because Erdogan usually defended his allies. Maybe Turkey remained silent to avoid ruining relations with the US, or maybe there was something else. Theory 4. Cuba's role. Maduro's security team included Cuban soldiers. Trump said, many Cubans lost their lives during the operation. Why was Cuba protecting Maduro? The answer is simple. because Venezuela was Cuba's lifeline. Since Chávez's era, Venezuela had been sending free oil to Cuba, billions of dollars worth per year. Without this, the Cuban economy would collapse. Some experts say Cuban intelligence prepared escape plans for Maduro. Maybe a submarine, a secret tunnel, a private plane. But the U.S. knew everything. The CIA had been monitoring Cuban operations for years, and during the operation, Cuban soldiers resisted, but had no chance. Chapter 10. Venezuela's Future. Hope or darkness? Now the question is, what will Venezuela's future be like? Scenario 1. Democratic transition. The most optimistic scenario, the U.S. organizes free and fair elections in Venezuela. Edmundo González and Maria Corina Machado return to the country. The people vote and a new democratic government is established. Sanctions are lifted. Foreign investment comes. Oil production increases. The economy recovers. The 8 million Venezuelans who emigrated return to their country. Venezuela becomes one of Latin America's wealthiest and most stable countries, as it once was. A beautiful dream, isn't it? But can it become reality? Scenario 2. U.S. occupation. A more realistic but more pessimistic scenario. The U.S. keeps Venezuela under control for a long time. American companies take over the oil sector. Military bases are established. Venezuela effectively becomes a U.S. protectorate. The people don't accept this, and resistance begins. Guerrilla warfare, terrorist attacks, internal turmoil. The Iraq and Afghanistan scenario repeats in Venezuela. Can't the Trump administration understand that this isn't sustainable in the long term? Doesn't history show that occupations always fail? But maybe the goal isn't long-term. Maybe the goal is to take the oil and withdraw. Scenario 3. Chaos and civil war. The worst scenario. Venezuela is dragged into complete chaos. Chavistas, opposition, groups within the military, crime cartels. Everyone fights for power. The country is divided into pieces. The refugee crisis multiplies. Neighboring countries are also dragged into instability. This would be a disaster not just for Venezuela, but for all of Latin America. The people's voice. On the streets of Caracas, people are divided. Some are celebrating Maduro's departure. They think they're finally free. Others are angry at the U.S. intervention. They shout, "Venezuela will not be anyone's colony." A Venezuelan woman says to the camera, "Maduro was a bad leader, yes, but the U.S. shouldn't have been the one to save us. We should have saved ourselves." Another man, "We starved for 13 years. Our children died. If the U.S. is helping us, welcome." Two different views, two different visions of the future, and a deep chasm between them. Chapter 11. Maduro's Legacy, the End of a Dictator. Nicolás Maduro's story is a story of rise and fall. He started as a bus driver. He became a union leader. He became Hugo Chávez's right hand. And finally, he became the president who ruled a country for 13 years. But his rule will be remembered for hunger, poverty, oppression, and corruption. 8 million Venezuelans had to leave their country. They left behind their parents, children, friends, just to survive. Hundreds of thousands of people couldn't access basic food, medicine, clean water. Hospitals collapsed, schools closed, crime rates skyrocketed. And who was responsible for all this? Maduro will say, the U.S. Sanctions destroyed us. We're facing economic warfare. But the truth is more complex. Yes, U.S. sanctions made the economy worse. But the real problem was the corruption, mismanagement, and authoritarianism of the Maduro administration. Maduro couldn't carry Chávez's legacy. Chávez was charismatic, a people's leader. But Maduro was just a shadow. And now, that shadow is gone too. Chapter 12. Lessons in Future. What do we learn from this story? Venezuela's story isn't just the story of one country. It's the story of the problems faced by resource-rich countries, great power intervention, and the struggle between popular will and external pressure. Lesson 1. the oil curse. Economists call this the resource curse. Countries rich in natural resources paradoxically tend to be poorer, more unstable, and more authoritarian. Why? Because the economy becomes dependent on a single resource. Corruption increases. Political competition intensifies to control resources. Venezuela is a perfect example. The world's largest oil reserves, but people dying of hunger. Lesson 2. Foreign intervention is never easy. The US brought down Maduro in 47 seconds. But what now? Remember Iraq. Saddam Hussein was quickly overthrown. But what happened next? 20 years of chaos, civil war, terrorism. Remember Afghanistan. The Taliban regime collapsed in a few weeks. But then, 20 years of occupation and eventually the Taliban returned to power. Overthrowing a dictator is easy, but establishing a stable democratic government in his place, that's much harder. Lesson 3. Popular will always wins eventually. History teaches us this. Popular will always wins eventually. Dictators fall, empires collapse, but peoples remain. The Venezuelan people resisted Maduro's oppression for 13 years. They protested, opposed, voted. And now they may have a chance to win their freedom. But this freedom must be something built from within, not imposed from outside. Lesson 4. Great powers always think of their own interests. Did the US intervene in Venezuela to bring democracy, or for oil and rare earth elements? The truth is probably a mixture of both. Trump openly saying, "We'll repair the oil infrastructure and sell oil," reveals his intention. Great powers act based on strategic interests, not humanitarian concerns. History has proven this repeatedly. Conclusion. An era closes, a new one begins. And here we are. Nicolás Maduro's 13-year rule ended in 47 seconds, the incredible rise and dramatic fall of a bus driver. But the story doesn't end here. It's actually just beginning. Venezuela has an uncertain future ahead. Will democracy come, or a new dictatorship? Freedom or chaos? Time will tell. But one thing is certain. This event is a turning point not just for Venezuela, but for the entire world. Because this operation is an indicator of the new world order. Trump's America First policy is being seen not just in rhetoric, but in action. The Monroe Doctrine has returned. Latin America is once again seen as the US's backyard, and this may be just the beginning. Will the Trump administration carry out similar operations against Cuba, Nicaragua, even Mexico? Who knows? One thing is certain, the world is changing, and this change is often dark and uncertain. Final words. Nicolás Maduro's story teaches us this. Power is temporary. Dictators eventually fall, but their falls sometimes come with blood and tears. The Venezuelan people have suffered for many years. Maybe now, finally, there is hope. Maybe now, finally, it's time for change. But change won't be easy. Because Venezuela's wounds are deep, its economy is collapsed, its institutions are fragmented, its society is divided. But Venezuelans are a strong people, the grandchildren of Simón Bolívar, the heirs of those who fought for independence. If they somehow find their way, Venezuela will rise again. Maybe this time, with real democracy, real prosperity, real freedom. Time will tell. In this video, I told you the secret story of Nicolás Maduro, the dark truth about Venezuela, and the US's shocking operation. I hope I was able to offer you a different perspective. If you found this video interesting, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel, because in the coming weeks we'll be sharing more content about Venezuela's future. You can write what you think in the comments. What do you think? Was the US intervention justified? What will Venezuela's future be like? Let's discuss, and remember, the truth is always more complex than it appears. To see the whole picture, you always have to dig deep. See you in the next video. Goodbye.